Hey, it's Dr. Scott. I want to talk to you guys a little bit about how to create an information graphic. If you're watching this video, it's probably because I've assigned some kind of information graphic be integrated into something that you're writing. So I'm going to walk through like the technical stuff, like how to create information graphics. But first you need to know why I'm asking you to do this. I think as writing becomes more visual and as people's attention spans for writing become much smaller, I think being able to represent complex information in data graphics, I think that is going to be the way folks persuade other people in the future. And I think in order to be kind of literate, to be persuasive in the 21st century, I think you're going to have to learn how to represent information, complex information, in information graphics. This is a topic that I kind of geek out about, and I'm going to try and rein that in a little bit. There's a great video by a graphic designer named David McCandless. He's in the United Kingdom, and he has created tons of just beautiful data graphics that actually convey some really interesting information. And I'll link that video in this on my YouTube page. So what I want to do is kind of give you guys a few examples of data graphics that you could create. I'm going to be working with a data graphic that, with data that comes from my own teaching. I try to keep track of the grades that I distribute every academic year. And here is a Excel spreadsheet. And I keep this Excel spreadsheet every year, and I try to update it pretty often. But has all the number of students that I have in a class, the number of A's I assign, B's, C's, D's, F's, and then I have this not attending column. It's like folks that they stayed through the class, but they stopped showing up after a week like 8 or halfway through the semester or something like that. So the number of students that are not attending the class anymore. I don't teach a ton of students recently because I'm currently the faculty senate president at the university, so I teach fewer classes because I have those duties. And then I have some basic numbers like keeping track of the percentage of grades that I hand out and passing and non-passing. Okay, so that's the data that I have. I want to represent that information to students. Like I want to be able to tell students, and maybe in a future syllabus, I want to create an information graphic that can communicate to students what I think is most important for them to understand. And not manipulating the data, not changing the data, but kind of creating a graphic that emphasizes what I want students to get across. And just looking at these numbers, you may not kind of understand, like, all right, what does Dr. Scott want me to get across by looking at this number? And for me, it's this right here. I give out a lot of B's. For me, I think a B is a solid grade. If you did what was asked of you, you did a solid job on it, I think that's a B. And I think most students end up doing that. Some folks go a little bit above and beyond, and that's great. There's their A's. Some folks, C's get degrees too. Maybe they wanted to do a little less. But for me, I want to kind of emphasize to students, I think B is a solid grade, and B is about half of the grades that I give out. So I want to create some information graphics that might kind of get that across. So, because you you do numbers and stuff like that in Excel, but you do some writing in Word. Word has actually got some pretty useful features when it comes to information graphics. So you can create these graphics in Word. There's other applications that you could use to create your own information graphics, but I think Word is a good starting point if you haven't done this kind of thing before. So you go to the Insert tab, and we go to Charts. So we got all these different options here, and I've likely assigned some reading along with this video, probably something out of Argument Today. There's a section in there about information graphics, and it gives you a bunch of different options. The only thing I would kind of add to that is like the pie chart here, the 3D pie chart. I tend to encourage people not to use them because it kind of inflates these the numbers that are here, like this blue and the orange, because they have this 3D part. Sorry, it's acting weird, but it has this 3D part here towards the bottom of the pie. It looks bigger than it actually is, so I have people stay away from the 3D charts just because they can be a bit misleading. But you have all those other options there. So for me, like, I'm going to play around, and I'll pause the video really quickly while I enter some of this data in. But let's say I want to do a bar chart. And so we got a clustered bar, stacked bar, got different options here. I'm going to do clustered bar. So click OK. And this little Excel spreadsheet, which is embedded in Word, comes up, and it provides you some fields to enter. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the data that I showed you earlier, this data, I'm going to take that in and put those data in here. Okay, so I'm going to pause this really quickly, and I'll be back in just a minute. A little tidbit while I'm putting this together, if you want to add more fields here, so this is going to be one axis, this is going to be the numbers, and then you're going to have this other axis, your y-axis here, category 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's say if you want to add more, you just kind of drag this out, and you add more, or you add less. Okay. Be back in just a minute. Okay, the data's in. Entered it in here. It was just the exact same chart without the totals. It's that stuff represented here, and here's the chart. Okay. So, what stands out to you? For me, it's this orange bar here, and also that there's this one semester where I'm giving out more A's, where there are more A's assigned than usual. Now, these are raw numbers. Percentage-wise, if I was to translate this into percentages, that might tell a different tale. So being very clear about the data that you're representing and making sure that you're not kind of misrepresenting or overinflating the importance of some numbers, that's really important, and it's the ethical and right thing to do. But I think right here, just looking at raw numbers, man, in fall 2016, Dr. Scott gave out a lot of B's. I think that's what comes across pretty clearly here. So maybe that's an outlier. Moving to percentages might show something a little bit different. But you can tweak some of these. Chart title, you can rename this, so grade distribution for Dr. Scott, academic year 2016 through 2018. So it's a useful summary of what is going on in this graphic. We also have this key down here, which I think is pretty helpful. And then we've got the timelines here, and this is all being done by what you enter into this little Excel, this shortened Excel spreadsheet up here. Now there's a few things that you can kind of add here. You can right-click on the images, and maybe you can edit the data. You can also add data labels, which can be really helpful if you're providing some complex information, and it's kind of hard to understand. Here, I think in this bar chart, it's easier to understand what these numbers are, but definitely with like pie charts and things like that, adding a data label can be really helpful. So that gives you the actual numbers there. So I did that because I clicked on the orange. It gave me the origin number. So if you really want to emphasize one particular set of numbers or one data point, you can click on one of these and say, hey, I want to include data labels for that, and it's going to do that. Okay, so that can be kind of helpful. Showed a few other useful things to know about. One is the layout options. That just like integrating an image, you can get the text to flow around an information graphic. That can be helpful sometimes, especially if you have a smaller, especially a pie chart, because it can usually take up like one quadrant, 1/4 of a page. This, I wouldn't really want to put text over here on the side. I think it'd look really kind of funny and forced. So maybe I just kind of keep that where it's at. But you can also do square, which puts the text along the side. The plus, that's the chart element, so you can add different features that you want to be here. So if I want to use axis titles, so I want to add axis titles. Maybe I want to say semester, and then number of grades down here. That could be helpful. So I'll do that actually. Semester, and then down here for my x-axis, I add number of grades. Number of grades distributed. Okay, so that can be kind of helpful. So you can kind of play around with those a little bit. We can also, trend lines can be kind of useful. B kind of shows you where the trends are. This is, I think, much easier when you have a larger data set to kind of identify what is like what's the trend in that data that you're looking at. Got data table. You could include that. I don't think I would for this one, but you can play around with that. There's kind of a lot of fun stuff that you can do with that. Chart styles and colors. You can kind of play around with that a little bit. Say you want to change the colors. You also have options for that. And then values, like if you want to kind of emphasize one particular value over another, there's ways of going about that as well. You can select or deselect different, like if you didn't have very many results for F, let's say I didn't want to show that, there'd be a way to, you would be able to do that. And I think it'd be just as easy to go up here into the chart and kind of delete that. So those are some of the options. It takes some playing around with, it takes a little bit of patience, but you can go from having just a chart of a bunch of data to having some information that can actually be very visually appealing to an audience and be much more persuasive. Remember, these are, if you're integrating this into your writing, you should be talking about these data. You should be calling attention to important data points that you found and that you want your reader to know about. So that's what I have for now. If you got questions about this, make sure you let me know. This is something I'm pretty excited about. I think it can really improve your writing because you can be talking about specific data, and it makes your writing much more persuasive when you're able to add information graphics to your writing. All right, that's it for now.